Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seriously Loco, the Seriously Crazy fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC. I'm your host, Phil Bakke. I'm joined tonight by my co-host, Mikka Burrell. Mikka, another 3-game home set to start the season, and we've got a point to show for it.
It's technically better than last year, so lots of context around that, obviously, that we'll get into. But 3 games in a week. I'm tired. I'm not gonna lie. It was a lot, but happy to be here and to be talking about it tonight.
Fixture congestion. I am logging a petition with U.S. Soccer to pull out of the Open Cup, but we'll see. They haven't responded yet. We're also joined tonight by Christian Canales. Christian, I know you're back from the happiest place on earth, but how you doing?
I'm exhausted on several fronts, but glad to be back here for season 6. I know you guys went through all that fanfare already, but happy to be here again for another year.
Christian pulling a Joaquin Rivas, letting us start the season without him, but that's we're excited to have you back. And so for those of you who are finding us for the first time, or maybe if you're not, you can find us on pretty much any podcast platform. We recently redid some of our RSS feed and all that stuff, so we should be popping up in basically any place that you might find your podcasts. Even Audible apparently is now collecting our podcasts. So that is a thing. One thing that is relatively new is YouTube is also carrying RSS feeds for podcasts, and we are on there. And for anyone who uses YouTube for anything in terms of browsing and watching random videos, if you search El Paso Locomotive, our results are pretty much up there. We are popping up a lot, maybe almost too much. But we will have all of our new episodes on YouTube as well. I know I asked if you guys had tried that, but Mikka, I think you did, where it was oh damn.
Yeah, no, it is a lot. I mean, obviously the club's in there too, and USL, but yeah, all of our episodes are there now. It's amazing. I don't know what you did, but they're all there.
It's the algorithm is working, our keywords or whatever are working, but but for anyone, hopefully for anyone who is finding us through YouTube, welcome. And we're on Twitter and Instagram at Seriously Loco. Check us out. And we have a handful of folks who contributed sort of thoughts about the season so far. And we'll include those in the show. And if you want to do the same, you can just hit us up on Twitter, and we will typically include some fan thoughts in each episode. So make sure you do that. And without further ado, Christian, I mean, we know we started the season without you, but we got to get into mid-season form here quickly. And we've got Christian's question to get things kicked off before we talk a little bit of Locomotive football here. But what do you got for us today?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I just got back from vacation, spring break with the family. So I just want to know, what is the best amusement park you've ever been to?
Phil, go ahead.
I mean, I gotta go for the OG and represent the Midwest with Six Flags Great America in Gurnee, Illinois, right there outside of Chicago. It's where I guess I got introduced to even the concept of roller coasters. And it is, in terms of amusement parks, I mean, Six Flags, for anyone who's been, is light on amusement and high on just making the most insane roller coasters that feel like you're going to die on. So that's it is more of that than say Disney World or something that has a lot of other stuff going on. But yeah, I think Raging Bull is I think it's one of the tallest coasters in the United States, maybe the world. I don't know. I don't know what roller coasters are like elsewhere. If there's one, in Dubai somewhere that's the tallest in the world now, but But yeah, I'll go Six Flags Great America just because that was my introduction to amusement parks. So
yeah, Six Flags is underrated. I think it gets a bad rap, but
it was all because of that marketing campaign with the old man and the Venga Boys or whatever, the the Venga bus.
Yes. Those are good. Yeah, Six Flags is good. I mean, growing up in New Jersey, we had Six Flags Great Adventure, so
that's right.
Yeah. But I have two actually. It's a tie. So my first one is called Busch Gardens in Williamsburg, Virginia.
Yep.
I like that one because that is heavy on the amusement. I mean, they've got the roller coasters too, but it's like Europe themed, so it's really cool. I mean, they even have like a beer garden and stuff. So I always thought that was cool. I mean, there's like a Scotland area and like a Paris area and all that. So, and that was the park where I rode my first roller coaster actually. So 6th grade, yes, I was talked into it on a band trip, bullied basically by fellow students, but that's okay.
It's when hazing was allowed,
right? Back in our day. And then the other one, which is like heavy on the thrills, is Cedar Point on Lake Erie in Ohio. I mean, if you like roller coasters, Cedar Point is it. I mean,
it's about an hour down the road from here. In Sandusky.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so
Sandusky, yes. And it's just beautiful. Like just being out on the lake like that is really nice. So
yeah.
Yeah, I would go with those two.
Yeah, I underrated just how many people think like Cedar Point is an actual attraction, which it totally is, don't get me wrong, but the amount of people who like vacation in the summer like to Sandusky for this explicit purpose of going to Cedar Point is a lot more than I would have guessed. I didn't know what a Sandusky was before I moved up here, so so.
It's kind of like halfway between you and like Cleveland, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, sort of splits the difference, yeah. Wait, so so Christian, I mean, you just got back from Disney World, so what's your answer?
So Disney World is great. Like, don't get me wrong, and like I'll probably end up back there, you know, at least a handful more times in my lifetime, but I think that it's a lot. You can't relax. You can't relax and get your money's worth. It's like one or the other. So that takes it out of the running for me. But for me, it's Universal Orlando. And the reason why is it just has a lot of my favorite like IPs. Between like Harry Potter and, you know, superhero, like not Disney Marvel, but like comic Marvel kind of stuff. So has just a lot of the IPs that I like. So I like it.
No, that's
I've never
fair.
I've never been. I've passed by, but I've never been to Universal that I can recall anyway.
Yeah, we went probably about, what is it, 2024 now, like 7 years ago now. Back when the Harry Potter stuff was still relatively new, and so that was a lot of fun.
Nice.
That's legit. Yeah. Yeah, my sisters went like explicitly for Harry Potter. I don't know that they even saw the rest of the park. Like I think they may have just gone to that. But that was back in the day now. Probably similar time frame, I guess. Well, no, that was well, welcome back. I know you're thrilled to be back and back at work, etc. But it's just
a fantastic time to be a Locomotive fan too.
We're just welcoming you back to all kinds of good news. All that being said, it is a nice segue into the fact that we do need to chat about Locomotive's 1-0 loss to Louisville City. There was a little bit of a familiar vibe to these results. Although, you know, with the start of last season, there was just a lot of parallels. It felt like with some of these like narrow losses and things like that, which on the one hand could be cause for optimism given the run that Locomotive went on starting with that first away game last season. But we do have a handful of things to kind of break down. And obviously this is off of the back of that late draw against Monterey Bay, and a draw that felt like a loss rather than the other way around, given the late nature of Tristan Traeger's equalizer for Monterey Bay. But against Louisville City, I mean, I think there's two sort of like elephants in the room here. And the first is, Mikka, I mean, we talked about prior to when the lineup was announced before Louisville City, we talked about the lack of rotation, and it just felt like with how the game played out, it felt even more of a factor, I guess, given just how leggy and mistake prone like a handful of our players felt. It just looked like the minutes were really getting to them.
Yeah, I mean, this was game 3 of 3 in a week, and it showed, I think. Obviously, that the starting 11 comes out, and the only change, I think, was Arun Basuljevic coming in for Justin Dillon, who, as Brian Clarehout revealed earlier in the week, had been suffering from a bout of food poisoning, so, fair enough that he starts on the bench. It's not always easy to come back from that. But yeah, I was a little surprised at the lack of rotation, and I asked Brian about this after the game, if, there was more of a temptation to make changes, but he basically explained that he felt comfortable with the selections that they did make, and that they were happy to have Justin come on in the half, since he was a little more fresh, having been saved a little bit in the first half. So, yeah, but overall, I don't know. I just was a little bit surprised to see so many of the same faces, just because that's a lot of minutes to put into the same players, just starting out the season. I think there is maybe a temptation sometimes, not just for Locomotive, but for any side all the way up to the very top of the game, to like solidify, your starting 11 and try to make the team gel as quickly as possible. But I think for us, I mean, we don't have our full complement either. So that kind of, I think, makes the decisions harder. But I was a little surprised to see so many people start again. And I don't know, maybe we paid for that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's hard. Their job is to win every game. And especially the way Brian has presented himself, he's not the type to say, especially with a 3-game home stretch, to say, well, we'll just try and hedge things and make sure that things don't go too terribly. Like, he's the kind of guy that wants to go out, and if there's 9 points to be won in a week, then he wants all 9 of those points. And to his credit, I mean, he put out the best 11 that we have. 'Cause like you said, Mikka, we're missing a lot of people, and like, could we survive with the rotation? Yeah. Like if we, if Hines starts, if Dollenmeyer starts, is that a team that can do a job? Sure. But I think he just really wanted to try and get something, especially with the way the first 2 matches have gone. Try and get something, get 1 win out of this 3, out of this really unfortunate scheduling situation. And I think that's kind of the mindset that he was in. And so like you said, I was very surprised too at the lack of rotation, especially given the week that we have coming up too. But if I had to think about what he was thinking, it must be that, I have to get something out of this. And unfortunately, that's starting those players was the best way to do it, I think.
Yeah, I think I would say you guys are probably onto it in that, along with that, trying to build some semblance of sort of rhythm and, like you said, Mikka, you're trying to nail down kind of what is the best 11, and you've got some sense of that, but obviously a small sample size and a handful of preseason matches to go off of. So with the amount of change that's gone on, with the couple of injuries that we're carrying as well, it just like, it feels like it may have been more of an effort to not shake things up like too much, and give some guys like runs in the team. But it's clear from, having to sort of make like some halftime subs that weren't tactical necessarily and felt more like fitness related, obviously with Dylan coming off at halftime against Monterey Bay and then Moshibane for Dylan against Louisville at halftime. Like, I think there was, just a pressure to try to manage the minutes and find ways to make changes without shaking the team up too much. But I do want to talk a little bit about the team itself, and the shape, I think in particular, has, drawn some attention given the fact that things have looked like maybe a little bit imbalanced at times. And I think one of the things that's gotten maybe more attention, John Morsey ran an article today on his Substack about Locomotive's defense and how it is like very reliant on the center backs covering for the wing backs, and how that has been exploited to a certain extent, by Locomotive's opponents. And that's not to say that the center backs haven't been playing well, but just that there is space to exploit. And I think I would probably argue on the in possession, there are times where it feels like the spacing doesn't quite lend itself to the link up that we would like to see in terms of transitioning or playing through the press, like playing from back to front. And we often sort of rely on like playing a long ball over the top, like versus playing through the press and playing like into midfield. And I think, I wrote about it in one of my articles that I wrote earlier today, but Eric Calvillo, I think, touches the ball 37 times against Louisville City, if I'm correct, which just feels like awfully low. That's more of the amount that you'd expect like a forward to touch the ball, like who is going to have like less touches in the match. Whereas Calvillo, like being an 8 and like ostensibly sort of the box to box guy in that midfield, like you would think he would probably have on the higher side of touches in the game, where Liam sort of has like a decent amount. I think Basuljevic actually has more than Eric, but all that being said,
lowest on the team besides Toomey.
Yeah, and Toomey only played 45 minutes, which is that's like, so yeah, kind of illustrates the point. Thank you for that. I think like in general, I don't know. I'm just like I'm not seeing the vision yet in how this shape is meant to work, because it feels like the spacing doesn't quite make sense in possession to find the forwards facing the goal. Like they're asked to sort of back down their defenders, which when it's Moreno and Moshibane, like that's not really the type of players that they are. You want them receiving the ball, like facing the goal or running at somebody, or running in behind. And it just feels like maybe it's so reliant on the wingbacks that we are sort of ignoring like other phases where we could play through midfield and play more centrally. I don't know. I know this is getting a little bit like ranty and rambly, but it just feels like something's like not quite right with the shape.
I mean, I think you're onto something there. And I think, I don't know if you've noticed this, Phil, but I think my kind of issue with the shape early doors is that it's so left-hand dominant as well. Yeah. I mean, and that might be why we're not seeing it make a whole lot of sense yet, because we should be able to move the ball in every area of the pitch, just as well. But right now, our whole attack is Lucas Stauffer. I mean, if the ball is getting forward, it's because of him.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously that's a big credit to Lucas, but at the same time, like Lucas has played. Did he play 90 minutes all three games?
Yeah, I don't think he's been subbed off.
Yeah, which Brian said that he's completely fine with that his workload is fine. He didn't need to be rotated, and that's great. But that can't be our only outlet. And on top of that, Lucas being right-footed, like sometimes he will drift into midfield, and we're not even getting that width anyway.
Right.
So for me, that's been kind of the thing about the shape that I'm just have been noticing and kind of wanting to see more out of the likes of Miles Lyons, whoever plays on that right 8 spot, whether that's Busujevic or Moshabane, I guess time will tell. That right side of the pitch is not functioning nearly as fluently as the left, and so I think naturally you end up looking a little lopsided. And on top of that, I mean, and John highlights this in his piece, really encourage people to go read it, but that ball over the top into the space that the wingback leaves behind, it's just too predictable at this point. And I know it's a small sample size, and these are all things that can be addressed. They're not fatal by any means, but we're just talking about what we've seen so far. And Tony Alfaro, I think, has done as well as he can trying to cover that space when Lucas bombs on. Brandan Craig, I think we'll talk about him and how he kind of gets isolated, and unfortunately it leads to a really nasty fall. But yeah, these are all things that I've noticed too about the shape that I don't know. I don't think that it's quite clicking just yet. And
I think the thing that we can call it, I mean, you mentioned the center backs and we can chat about them in a little bit, but I think the thing that I would want to emphasize is I think our center backs have played quite well, given the size of the task like that they're being asked to do. And I mean, they haven't really been at the heart of the issues, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, right. And in particular, we'll talk about Louisville City's goal as well. And there might be some light criticism on the center backs, but I think there's something that one feels a little bit more, inflicted by what happens on the wing versus, what happened in the box. But all that being said, Locomotive come out of the gate, and early on, I think the game was still really like sort of taking shape when Amano Moreno is played in down the left-hand side, gets to the byline, and chips across to the back post. Damian Loss in Lou City's goal completely at sea. Like it's over his head, but it's not able to be cleared or dealt with by any of the defenders. It's allowed to bounce, and it looks like Eric Calvillo is sort of like running onto it to just smash it into an empty net. And he either like loses his footing or is attempting to slide to shoot. I can't really tell which, because the timing looked fine for him to just run onto it and volley it. But in the end, like he sort of goes for this like slide shot. And unlike the game against Monterey Bay, in which they scored that early goal through Amano Moreno, Locomotive not able to capitalize on the early chance. And this had like last like 2023 Locomotive written on it, where that early chance always seemed to come and they never really seemed to take it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great throw in from Lucas Stauffer, who, by the way, like, we're just learning more and more about him every week, and he's apparently got really good throw-ins in his locker as well. But yeah, the throw-in plays Moreno in behind. The cross to Calvillo is really good. I don't know. I thought maybe Eric was maybe late a bit with his run, but it's hard to see, like, on the replay exactly what happens if he slips or what. But I mean, the net was gaping, and like, just how different would our discussion be tonight if that goes in, right? And Eric said after the match, like, he acknowledged, like, I'm not a natural goal scorer, but like it hurts to not put those chances away and things like that. So I know that if anyone's feeling poorly about that not going in, it's him. He's the captain, and he takes these things really to heart. And he admitted that he's pretty hard on himself with his own game. So yeah, it's unfortunate, because I think that really would have gotten Eric's season in particular going, because yeah, like you said, mentioning the 37 touches, that's really like kind of shocking for a midfielder, and it would have done him a world of good to score that goal, but just too late or slipped or something. It just wasn't to be. Is
there something, Christian, like about that early chance that just feels like, I don't know. Moreno obviously like takes his against Monterey Bay, but there's sometimes like these chances, it just feels like the cliche of like it came too early in the game. Like sometimes it just feels like that does apply to Locomotive sometimes.
Yeah, I think so. It's yes, but in the end, I mean, it all just comes down to whether you do it or not. Because I don't think his was that early in the match. The Calvillo chance we're talking about.
It was in the 10th minute.
Oh, okay. It felt much later than that. That game, as we were watching it, that game was dragging. But okay. So yeah, I mean, they're still like growing into the game at that point, getting their legs under them, especially with kind of the week that we've been having, just getting used to running, out on the field again. So, yeah, I mean, maybe in a few minutes when they're a little more comfortable with how things are going, that ends differently.
The tough thing about this match, you mentioned it, Mikko, in the 15th minute, Brandan Craig, there's a Louisville have the ball on their left-hand side, Locomotive's defending their right side. Miles Lyons like kind of bites into midfield to try to win a ball, I think, and sort of presses into midfield, doesn't win the ball or like commit a foul, sort of like to break up the play. Ball goes in behind, into that space that he's vacated on that right-hand side. Brandan Craig is the center back on that side of the back three, goes to cover the space, is challenging for the ball, and just completely like his ankle just sticks, basically, or his cleats stick, his ankle just keeps going. Did not look good on replay in terms of like he went over in a heap, clearly in a ton of pain. It didn't look good on replay. He obviously ends up leaving, the swap in a boot, like seen on, he had like crutches and a boot by the end of the match. They said maybe a bad sprain, but anything else that you gleaned from the way they talked about the injury or any of the reactions from the team? Because obviously it looked a pretty bad one.
Yeah, I mean, Brian said that it looks like a high sprain, but at the time that he was telling us this, it was immediately after the game, so I would be shocked if, Brandan had any meaningful scans or anything at that point. But yes, he did leave the swap in a boot and crutches. Really ugly fall. Like, I just really feel for the kid because, I mean, he was getting stood up by Ray Serrano, who had a really good game, to be fair.
Yeah.
Tricky winger that he is. But it's just really unfortunate how his boot seems to stick in there. And I've seen some people blaming the pitch. I don't know necessarily if that's the case. That's not a particularly like bad spot on the pitch. I think it's a lot more precarious near the pitcher's mound, to be fair.
Yeah.
So Brian said it's looking like a high ankle sprain. We'll know more, I guess, as the days go on. But what I found interesting was that Eric Calvillo was asked about how that affects the team, and he seemed a little more pessimistic about it, I guess, and like it's a big loss, and someone's gonna have to step up, and this is professional football, and it happens. So, I don't know. I my personal opinion is that he'll probably be out for a little bit because that just did not look good. But I'm by no means a doctor. Yeah, it was bad, and I feel for him because I know there's also a pretty sizable Philadelphia Union contingent online that is watching his progress, and to see their player go down like this, I'm sure was tough on them too.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's exactly what you don't want to see when you send a player on loan and getting meaningful game time. Obviously, I think Brandon's also been quite bright. I think the first game he was like sort of getting up to speed with things, but I think he's been very solid overall and just really unfazed, I guess, by most of what's been thrown at him. And it was very unfortunate, and just hoping that it's not as bad as it looks. Lou City, Christian, I think like the story of the first half was that Lou City was really unsettling Locomotive with their press. It felt like a lot of the time, but there were a handful of times in the first half where Locomotive started to launch like some meaningful attacks. It was primarily down their left-hand side. Lucas Stauffer, obviously, like playing a big part in that. Calvillo was linking up at that point. Lou City have this sort of flurry of like 15, 20 minutes where they're picking up a yellow card like every 5-6 minutes at the end of the first, or, from the middle to the end of the first half. It felt a little strange, I guess, that from that level of like discomfort where they were committing these fouls and getting these bookings, that Locomotive couldn't maybe make more of that, given the players that were on bookings.
Yeah, but I just think it all comes back down to the fact that, it just seems like we're just having trouble moving the ball, period. The couple of times that we do, Louisville puts in good fouls to stop us, and any of the other times I just think we're having trouble getting going anyways. It felt like we spent, at least in the early parts of the game, later on in the first half we got a little more fluid, but early parts of the first half, it felt like we hardly left our half at all, and so that defense, Louisville's not having to work as hard defending. So I think that has something to do with it, and that just getting the engine going is where we're struggling right now. Because we do see sequences where once we get the ball moving, if we can get 2 or 3 passes connected in a row, we can move the ball. It's just getting those first 2 or 3 passes without resorting to sending it down the field is just lacking right now.
Yeah, the
first shot on target is in the 24th minute. So
yeah,
I think that just illustrates Christian's point of like crossing halfway line is a really tall task for this Locomotive side right now. And I don't know if that has to do with, in this game particularly if it was the fatigue or if we're still getting to grips with all the new players. I'm sure it's a combination of all of those things, but in the meantime, it's kind of brutal viewing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's insignificant that so Locomotive complete 338 passes, which and they only had a team like completion percentage of 74%, which is quite low, like compared to I think what we're maybe typically used to in terms of like getting the ball down and playing. 215 of those passes were completed in our half. So like basically like 2/3 of the passes that we complete in the game are inside of our own defensive half, which sort of illustrates kind of the point I was trying to make at the beginning of the episode, but I think I struggled to, was our spacing between our defenders and midfield is okay. But as soon as we try to advance the ball, like that's where it really becomes sort of like incoherent. And I know that's not what we're trying to do. And that's where I'm trying to find out like how is it meant to work? Because I think we just rely on, after passing it around, we try to invite the press and then go long, but the press isn't so committed that we're finding a ton of space like further downfield. Like teams are sort of able to press us, force us into this long pass, and then a big defender wins a header against Amano Moreno, and it's like, okay, like obviously, or Justin Dillon, like as we've seen throughout the season, does win the ball, and it's him and Amano Moreno against the entirety of the opposing defense. Like, and I think the one area, or, the goal against Monterey Bay is sort of like where we saw it function in a way that it could, which is where Moshe Bane like drives it forward, finds Dillon, who lays it off to Moreno. But that was winning the ball back off an opposition attack and quickly transitioning versus like playing through a press like with the ball. That was like reliant on the transition, I guess, if that makes sense, and catching a team like out of position where it's like, how is it meant to work when the team is in position, like, and they're just defending us? Like, are we supposed to be like creating transitions, sort of like that De Zerbi ball style where you put your foot on the ball and try to trigger a press so that you turn it into a transition game? But I don't think that teams are really biting so hard on us passing it around the back that we're creating a ton of space up top. And that's not even to mention like the dimensions of the field at the swap that might not be exactly conducive to that style. But anyways, mentioning, we get to halftime, it's 0-0, and Justin Dillon does come on for Tumi Moshibane at halftime. This felt like I said earlier, it felt more like minutes than strictly tactics, but given the way that we were approaching the game offensively, I mean, Dillon definitely makes more sense than Moshibane because we have someone to win the long passes over the top, basically.
Yeah, and I do think that when this team has Justin Dillon in it, it does look better. I do think the ball tends to stick more, right, in those areas of the pitch when he's on the pitch and playing. Like we said, he was good enough for 45 minutes because of his illness earlier in the week. So hopefully he'll be back to something close to 100% soon, because I mean, some of the best through balls actually have come through him. Like, some of the best creative moments have come through Justin Dillon, which I don't know if that's by design. I mean, when we talked in the season primer, I guess, of our podcast, I talked about how I really like that Justin Dillon brings people into play, but I didn't expect him to become like Borderplex Benzema, right? So if he does, great, right? But like, it's just been interesting that some of the best forward balls have been from him, including for our one goal against Monterey Bay. So he'll be a big player for us going forward, and like just keeping him healthy and keeping him in bubble wrap right when he's not on the pitch is so important. But yeah.
Well, and Christian, you mentioned like coming out of halftime, I think I was expecting maybe more of a change, maybe trying to move the ball with a little bit more pace, a little bit more trying to get it down and play. And I think we saw a couple of sequences like that, but in the end, about 10 minutes into the second half, ball on the right-hand side. There's like a sequence with a free kick. I think they win on that side of the field. They take it sort of quickly, and then Sean Touch, of all people, like gets down the wing and floats in across, and it just feels like it catches Locomotive out, like in sort of each aspect where they aren't able to stop the cross, and then despite people being in the area, like Wilson Harris wins a header over, the likes of like Akinyode and Alfaro, who obviously are like in there to be dominant in the air. And it felt like a very cheap goal to give away to opposition like Louisville, who you don't need to give a ton of help to beat you.
Yeah, I mean, the finish was great. I mean, he got air, to his credit, and made good contact with it, and they just caught us sleeping because the ball gets to touch, because I'm trying to watch it again right now as we were talking about it. They win the ball from us on the right, on the right, and we're just not quick enough to move back to the left. And he catches us sleeping, and that's how he ends up with all that space down the flank there. And like you said, they don't need any help scoring, and us switching off at that moment was the difference there. Same as it's been for all three games. Just one moment of switching off and them taking advantage of it. Because each game, like all three of our games, we've conceded one goal, exactly one goal, and it's just that, you know, we let them have these chances and they're taking advantage of them, and we're having chances and not taking advantage of them.
Yeah. Mika, I think like one of the vibes of last year that feels present at this like early stage of the season, and obviously there's a long way for us to sort of like banish these these demons, but it feels like the team is like has to work really hard to create a move that creates something. And it feels like they kind of toil for a long time, like trying to create anything offensively. And then you have like a move like this where the ball just sort of like finds its way into space. A cross gets floated to the back post and it's a goal for the opposition, sort of for free. Like we didn't make them work that hard for it. And I guess like that just has to be frustrating. I know obviously the team is frustrated allowing a goal like that, but it does feel like we are having to work a lot harder to try to create these sort of situations than our opposition.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, this goal just annoyed me to no end, because to see a 32-year-old Sean Tosh sprinting down the wing like this is Chris Wilder's Sheffield United the first time they came up to the Premier League, it was just like, it just bothered me. Like, yeah. There's just no way, right? Like, that this should happen. I mean, I think Miles Lyons gives the ball away twice in the build up to the goal. You know, Toch even skips past Lucas Stauffer, who should be trying to stop the cross, but at the same time I have sympathy for him because he's our whole attack at the moment, and so like he's probably gassed, right, from all the forward runs. But yeah, no, I think there is definitely something to the notion that like we work and we toil for our chances, but then something just like flies in for the opposition. In this game, we have 6 shots on target, but the majority of those were just easily caught by Loss. Like, we really didn't work the keeper. I think
so, there's a Moreno chance like early in the second half that was maybe the most we worked him, but it was still like fairly central, and he sort of has to like jump to tip it over the bar, I think. Mm-hmm. But that was really it in terms of like shots that I can remember that were like truly dangerous.
The best piece of goalkeeping on the night was Jamali Waite keeping out a Dollenmeyer own goal.
Yeah. So. Insane reflex save. And it's wild that we should on balance, we should probably be talking about 3 Jamali Waite clean sheets, because my God, he's been amazing. And he's been extremely unlucky with the goals that he's conceded. But yeah, there's been a couple of moments. I mean, he probably should get save of the week again. He had that save last week from Ingalina that was so good. They cut out the amazing save he made right before.
Onto the post.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways,
I mean, to your point, it's obviously a very small sample size, but we at this moment have the worst goals against, expected goals against, like by a considerable margin over people that have already played. So that just shows you how crucial the Jamaican has been, to not letting these scorelines get more embarrassing, to be honest.
Yeah. And we're gonna lose him for a little bit of time.
And we're gonna lose him to Jamaica. So yeah, great.
Christian, you mentioned the like there were those handful of moves that felt like, okay, this is how it's supposed to work, right? And there's one in particular that stuck out in my mind. I can't remember exactly when it happened, but Vasiljevic plays a really great like switch. He receives the ball. It was the second half, I remember, but he receives the ball like in our half on the right hand side, and he plays this switch out to the left. And from there's like a sequence of passes and a chance at the end of it, and I was like, oh, like, so we can get the ball down and like play. But why are we not seeing it more? I guess like those moments were so few and far between, though, that I'm kind of left wondering, like, are those sorts of sequences repeatable, or are they just like happenstance in the current system?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it's not a coincidence. Those aren't like fluke movements. I think that's how things are supposed to work, and I don't have a reason why it's not working more consistently. But I think that, yes, that is what this team is built to do. I think it is supposed to work that way. But for one reason or another, it's not. I can't say that I remember exactly which opportunity you're talking about, but I feel like most of our chances are happening from, counters, which is great. But I think that for it to be more sustainable, we have to be able to possess the ball and then make those kinds of movements happen. I think that's the missing piece.
The late in the game, Mika, obviously Locomotive chasing an equalizer, and on 81 minutes they make a double switch, and Ricardo Zacharias and Diego Abarca come on. Calvillo goes off, Antonio Alfaro goes off, so it is like a change to a back four. I think Brian referred to it as a 4-4-2, which is like makes sense given the fact that we often played a 4-4-2 last season, so it's not outside the realm of possibility that that's what he reverted to. With the ball, it looked sort of like a 4-3-3, but with Zacharias and Moreno and Dylan sort of in this like attacking trio. To me, it looked like, and I know we were sort of talking at the time, and Christian, I want you to weigh in on this too, because you sort of played devil's advocate, but I think like the question mark is things looked better during that time, and can we put it down to, in those last 10 minutes, the shape made the team more coherent, or the spacing made more sense? Or was it just a case of we got some fresh legs on and Louisville were sitting back trying to defend this 1-0 lead like desperately, and we were attacking them sort of at will?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the latter might be more likely, that Louisville's sitting back more at that point of the match. But I think that maybe that right now at this point in the season still, I know everyone as far as we know, everyone had a decent sized preseason, but maybe the way with the wingbacks and stuff, and this might just be me projecting, but that might be more of a more like technical or complex way of playing that this squad together at this moment in the season is still struggling with. And so when you divert back into something like a 4-4-3-3, 4-4-2, which seems to be more, not to downplay what they're doing, and more elementary, more simple, it might just be easier for them to do naturally without having to think so much, maybe. I can't speak for the players. I'm not saying that they don't know what they're doing. I just think it could be that it's a more complex way of playing that they're still trying to figure out with all these new players.
And there's something sort of, I mean, you mentioned it, like the 4-4-2 and 4-3-3 are, I mean, they're among the most widely used formations, like for a reason. It is sort of like a natural sort of way of playing, and maybe a little bit more muscle memory to it. But Mika, what do you think of the closing stages of the match and how Locomotive looked?
I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that they were better when the shape changed. I mean, our shots went up like crazy, just 3 shots in the first half to 10 in the second. We had 5 of our 6 shots on target in the second half. Obviously I don't have timestamps for all of these things, but I do,
yeah, like all 5 of them probably came in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah. But yeah, I do think it was better, and I think I mean, I think Christian's probably onto something in that, 3 at the back or 5 at the back, however you want to call it, that is pretty complex. And I commend Ryan for trying to implement something like that in USL Championship. Not that others haven't done it before. I mean, we've seen Bob Lilly.
I think based on the amount of games that I watched, I was like USL manager play with a back 4 challenge, like level impossible. They all play with the back 3. It's insane. But the one you mentioned it, this particular system with the way that the wingbacks interact is different, I would say, than, this isn't a back 5 in the traditional sense where he's playing super defensive.
No, exactly. That's kind of the difference that I want to make, because you're absolutely right. A lot of people play back 3 and back 5 in this league, but I think the approach that we are going with is much more attacking, and I think that can be, I mean, it has its hazards, right? I mean, the spaces that open up and the ways that you can be exploited, that's all there. But at the same time, if you are, because we don't have an issue with chance creation. It's more about the finishing at this point and that bit of quality. So that's why this system, I can certainly see why Brian wants to use it, because it can be devastating, if played right. But, that sharpness, I hope, will come. I'm not necessarily panicking just yet. But yeah, I mean, I think it goes without saying, that there was an improvement once we went to something maybe a little more, I don't know, muscle memory, as you put it, I think is a good way of explaining that.
I think the Craig injury could be informative of the system potentially. Not to say that, because I think Noah comes on for Brandan, and I don't think there was a significant crazy drop off in quality or something like that. I think him and Alfaro switch sides so that Noah can play on the left side, because I think that's his more natural. I think he's left-footed actually, so I think he is plays on that side. So he switches with Alfaro. The injury though might inform Brian's choices, in terms of shape going forward, because if it is a long-term injury and you are sort of down a senior center back, obviously playing a back 3 and having to utilize more center backs does become a little bit more costly just in terms of the minutes and all of that. So it will be interesting. I don't know, what pairing he would go with, if it would be a, Bolu Alfaro center back pairing, or if he would go for youth, I'm not really sure, but maybe we see a bit of a change there. I think it is interesting though that in all of this, for the amount of wide attackers that we signed, none of them are sort of playing as wide attackers. So I think it's kind of interesting that, I mean, Moreno played on the wing, Moshibane played on the wing, Rivas played on the wing, and all of them have played other positions, don't get me wrong. Particularly, I think Rivas and Moshibane particularly played center forward primarily last year. But they have sort of that element to their game, and yet, this formation is sort of relying on their sort of in-game discretion to get into wide areas versus putting them on the wing. So just an interesting wrinkle to, squad composition and all that stuff. But, we got a couple of questions. Obviously Locomotive do end up losing this one, and I felt for Lucas Stauffer, who had to do the Estrella of the match. I always when I'm watching these games on TV, I just always feel for the you get named player of the game in the loss, and it's who wants to talk about that in a in a loss, the player getting put there and being and I get why the club does it and everything. It's not a shot at them. It's just it is a tough spot for a player to be hey, you were really good, and they always have to sort of say,
but not good enough.
Yeah. And I don't know, there's just a weird energy to the Estrella of the match, post loss. But we got asked sort of 3 games in, small sample size, but how do we feel? So Mark Ramos at Ramos5173 on Twitter said, is it reasonable to be more frustrated this year compared to last year? Season 2 of Clear Out starts better in terms of points, but in watching back the last 3 games, we should be dominating with the caliber of players we have. It feels soulless when watching the boys play, shrug emoji. And then at NickGo11 said, scale of 1 to 10, 10 being world is crumbling around us. How worried are you? So I'm going to take both of those things and ask, how worried are you on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst? And is it reasonable to be more frustrated with a 1-point start through 3 games of this season versus a 0-point start through 3 games of last season?
Do you want to go first, Mika? Or?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I was like, I'm at a 2 right now. I think there's a lot more context. Yes, the matches have been frustrating and we haven't been doing much, but I think there's a lot more context than just the table. It's a lot of matches in this compressed amount of time. And I think we maybe have one more stretch of like 3 game weeks this season. We get lucky in that regard. Unlucky that it happened right now and that we have the friendly and stuff on Wednesday, but we're lucky that I think our schedule gets easier from here. So I think that's important to keep in mind that these guys are exhausted right now. So I'm not panicked about it. I think soulless is a little bit harsh for the same reason. And I think that I'm less frustrated this year because yes, we have some really good players. But we also have a lot of players that have not been able to feature yet. I think that, in hopefully a couple weeks' time, we'll see Rivas on the field. And I think that that's going to change a lot of things in what we see as far as freshness, rotation, all that kind of stuff. Petrovic has not been able to come on yet. That's a huge factor. Like, arguably the best player that we kept from last season. And then another big piece of depth that we haven't seen is Elijah Martin. Still missing him. And the 2 outfield players from Juarez, Gonzalo Palua and Nevades. I'm particularly excited about Nevades because he does play at a right back position, and I think that if there was anywhere on the field that I'm looking to see something different right now, it's right there. For whatever reason, this isn't the same. It hasn't appeared to be the same Miles Lyons that we saw last year. So maybe he needs a break, or just a different perspective. So I think that is something to look forward to. So I'm not worried right now because there's still so much. What we have here is not it. This is not Locomotive 2024. So taking these results with a grain of salt, there are not that they don't matter, not that, I'm okay with coming away with 1 point out of the first 9 at home, but it's a very short amount of time right now. We've been playing for 1 week. Like, yes, it's been 3 matches, but this team has been on the field for 1 week. So I think we should take a step back and relax a little bit and let things bloom. Not too much because, as we've seen before, like last year, letting 1 or 2 results slip by can be the difference between, a 7 seed at the end of the season and a 4 seed at the end of the season, a home playoff match and not. But I think right now it's still a lot of football to be played.
Well said. Look, I can dispense with Nick's question pretty quickly. On the scale of 1 to 10, I'm at like a 3. I'm not panicking yet. Christian made the point better than I could say it. It's been 1 week of football, and yes, there's been many matches in that 1 week, but it's still just been 1 week, and I really don't think that we can draw too many conclusions from all of this. There's so much football left to play. I mean, it's just, yeah, I think you'd be mad to sign off on this season already. But at the same time, going to Ramos5173's question, we're not, Seriously Loco is not in the business of telling people how to feel about El Paso Locomotive. So if you feel that what you're seeing is soulless, then that is, that's completely fair. What I will say about that comment, and I think maybe this is what he's getting at, I don't know, but this is kind of something that I've been feeling, is two things. One, we've become very poor at home. And I think when you're as poor at home as we have been in the past, last season.
It's going on. Yeah, this will be the third season. Like, if that record continues in a row that we've been not good at Southwest University Park. When it used to be, it was a fortress that last season under Lowry. We literally lost one game at home the whole season.
And we won 5 last year.
Yeah.
Only managed to win 5.
Yeah, so that number one right there, the home form is really gutting, and I think that really negatively affects fans' connection to the team. Because that's the only time really that most people see them play. We sometimes go on the road, right? And some of the diehards do too, but that's not practical for most people. So, we were the second worst home side in the West last season. Only Lights were worse than us, while being the best away side, which is nuts. So yeah, it's that's a big deal. And I think that might contribute to some of the, kind of the negative vibes from some fans to outright indifference about Locomotive, which I would argue is worse. And then on top of that, so the home form got through that. My other point is this team has been rebuilt and overhauled so significantly that we don't have emotional connections to these players just yet.
Yeah. The
only player that remains from season 1 is Yuma, who is more or less been relegated to a bench position at this point, right? Big locker room presence, obviously, tons of experience, worth keeping around for that reason, but not one who's going to appear as often as he used to. We've lost a lot of big personalities over the years. Richie Ryan, Andrew Fox, Lucho Solignac. These are big personalities who made sure to make a connection with the fans, right? And we have to give these players, I think we have to give these players the opportunity to connect with us. But right now, it just doesn't exist for the simple fact that they're all brand new.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that there's an emotional connection that's missing right now for those two reasons. And it's not impossible to build that back up, right? But it is going to be, it'll behoove the club to do that, right? To build that relationship back up with the fans. Because yeah, being poor at home, as poor as we've been, and yeah, just the new players, I think that combination leads to like this kind of void, I think, that some people are feeling.
Yeah.
And we have the players to do it too, because as far as building that connection, because I joked around with Mikka after the press conference on Saturday. We got the chance to speak with Armando Moreno, and like, I really wanted to not like him just because I hated playing against him when he was with New Mexico so much. And when I say not like him, I mean purely from a fan perspective. Obviously, these are all people. But I had this image of him in my head just from exposure over the years. But he's a really likable guy, and you can tell that he just wants to win. He just wants to compete, and he wants to win, and what's not to like about that? So I think that one thing that the club has consistently done is bring these people that are really, really good personalities to have on your team. And I think that's a credit to them. That they do vet these players that they're bringing in. They're not just signing whoever they can. They're making sure that they're people that they want wearing the shirt that represents the club.
Yeah, no, that's well said. And I think when you think back to season 1, even like we sort of like struggled out of the gate, and it was like, when are we going to get that first win, and when are we going to, score that like first big important goal and all that stuff. And then like it happened. And those moments are sort of etched like, in all of our minds in terms of like those big moments that connected us to like some of the players that were such like, features at the club. And so, like you said, Mikka, I think like that, was well said in that, like, we have to give them time to kind of create that connection, and those moments will organically create it. And so I think to answer the question, for me, I am on a similar end of the scale, like, a 2 or 3 at the moment. The only source of worry right now is just that from a tactical standpoint, like, I haven't seen the offense function in the way that I think it's meant to. And I want to know that it's not meant to function this way, because I think for long periods last season, we sort of played like this when we were sort of backs against the wall and losing a bunch of games. This was sort of how we defaulted to playing, where we just like really lumped it long and like hoped that something would happen. And we scored like 5 goals, like the last like half of the season. So I just want to know, I want to see like the evidence that it's not meant to work like that. Cause I just think like it's going to be a long year if that's what the plan is. I don't think it is. I think we've sort of like gotten in that mode, especially in the couple of games like going behind. So all that being said, not like overly worried. I just want to see like a little bit more. And again, super small sample size. So there's nothing that we can like draw big conclusions on. But I totally understand like why fans would be getting frustrated. And I think, Mikka, you hit the nail on the head with the home form, because it's, and it goes well beyond the context of this season. It's like going back now 2 full years of like poor form at home. When the season preceding that, we had literally the best, we were 1 game away from having a completely unbeaten home record for an entire season. So, yeah. Well, speaking of home games, at Southwest University Park, so we're recording this on Monday night. Wednesday night, it is Locomotive versus FC Juarez at Southwest University Park. In-season friendly between the two sister clubs of Mountain Star Sports Group. Obviously, Bravos like in the middle of their League MX campaign, and Locomotive now in the middle of the USL Championship season. This is something that we've been calling for quite a long time, and it felt a little bit like be careful what you wish for, I guess, like in terms of where it's like, hey,
no, not like that,
not exactly. Like this, yep.
Not like that. And I know we're kind of like taking the piss a little bit, but I just there is something like a little bit. Because I didn't want to go in, but there's something a little bit rough about an organization like planning a friendly between its 2 teams that it owns and being like, our hands were tied. We had to schedule it like during the season. And it's like, you had complete control over all of this. And I'm just like, I don't know. Like, that's probably not the tone I even wanted to have for this conversation, but I just can't help myself. Like, it just feels like such an own goal to have this game like right now.
It's rough given the form that both of these teams are in, actually. Both winless. Obviously Locomotive in a much earlier part of their season than Bravos are right now. And both playing in a kind of tight spot in the calendar. Locomotive will play this friendly on Wednesday. Then they'll have to travel to Vegas on Saturday, or for Saturday. Bravos playing this game on Wednesday, having to travel for their match on Friday, which is even crazier. So I think that fact alone is going to inform a lot of what we're likely to see on the field. But it is, you can't help but have a little chuckle at it. as a fan of both teams, I'm very grateful for the fact that it is happening. It's just, could the circumstances be better? Of course, so they always can. But like you said, you get what you ask for, and here we are. So, I'll tell you, I'm going to be there in the stands for this one, wearing 2 shirts and switching them out depending on what the score is. So
it's going to be like that Homer Simpson gif.
Going back into the hedge.
Yep. I think it's undeniable that commercially this is going to be good for the club, right? Like, it's going to sell out. There's a very, very low amount of tickets still left for the game. I'm sure there will be no tickets left by the time Wednesday rolls around. I have to think that there will probably be additional tickets sold at the door, like standing room only type stuff. And I'm sure commercially it will be good, like for the organization. And I do think that they have to like sort of have a rethink about how it goes, because I think they do also run the risk of, if both teams play and the sides are like completely unrecognizable, then when you do it again next year, like, people may not show in the way that they did this year. Like, if it is, squad numbers 200 through 227 for Bravos, like, people may not invest in it next year when it rolls around, if they think like, oh, well, since this is mid-season, like, only the kids play in it and we don't actually like get a first team friendly.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting as a spectacle for sure. I'll do my best to be there to cover it. Yeah, it's brutal. Like, the scheduling's brutal. Like, I don't think we're being controversial by saying that. But yeah, both of these teams are in pretty bad form, so it's really interesting, like, to think of what could possibly happen. Like, if it's scoreless at the end, do we go to like penalty kicks? Like, what's the format? Like, whatever provides maximum entertainment, I'm okay with, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I'm not a Bravos fan myself, but I can certainly see the appeal of wanting to get both fan bases together. And yeah, it'll be interesting. I assume it'll be a pretty sizable contingent of fans in lime green. And if there was ever a fixture where double-sided scarves makes sense, it's this one.
I was thinking like, they should have players who have played for both sides, like, turn out for both sides and like switch at halftime.
Full testimonial.
Yeah. Wait, this is the Gomez testimonial.
Bring Gomez back.
I was going to say, this is the Gomez testimonial that we deserved and never got. So yeah, they play Wednesday. You mentioned, Christian, they play on Wednesday. That's wild that Bravos have the turnaround to Friday, that we're not seeing a Bravos first team player even enter the stadium, I don't think. But that being said, Locomotive do travel to Vegas.
Actually, I have to correct myself. It's Saturday. They played Friday of this past week, just so.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's still not like.
Still, I mean, it's same turnaround as us, but still.
Yeah. So Locomotive Saturday traveling to Vegas, and I know, like, Vegas obviously under new management, Jose Bautista taking the team over, there have been some positive changes at the club. They've become a little less unserious than they were last year. Actually, I would say significantly more serious than they were last year. On the field, it hasn't really shown yet. They haven't looked great. But Mikka, I mean, you were watching Vegas take on Tulsa over the weekend to do a bit of scouting. I was able to catch a little bit of the replay, but what did you make of Vegas and what sort of threat they might pose on on Saturday against Locomotive.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you. I think they are a much more serious proposition than they were last season, but it obviously remains to be seen. It's not been the best start for them. 2 losses, 5 goals conceded. I did watch the Tulsa game, and honestly, I mean, Tulsa dominated the game, and they scored their goals, excuse me. Pretty much. I mean, there was 2 right away in the first half, and then they got the insurance one like 10 minutes into the second half. But despite that, Vegas didn't look like completely hopeless. I mean, I think their midfield, I mean, they transitioned really quite well, actually, from defense to attack, trying to get it, players like Asante and Joe Giao, or Zhao, involved. Locomotive old boy Edison Ascona has a really nice assist, takes his man on, then whips in a cross with the weaker foot, and I think it was Alba who scored.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Vegas had plenty of fight in them. It just wasn't their day. And with 5 goals conceded, that's I think the most for now in the league. Obviously, very small sample size, and so naturally defense will be the question mark, I think, but they've made some really interesting signings. I think if Ascona can continue in this vein of form, if Zhao can find a good form, if Solomon Asante can find some form off what was a pretty meh time at Indy 11, I think that this team can offer something this season. I think they were decent in the loss, to be fair, and Tulsa just are very good. So
yeah. I was actually kind of taken aback by how good Tulsa looked given the off season that they had. I was kind of figuring that they would be a meme as well. But y'all saw the Goodrum goal. Mm-hmm. I mean, crazy. I know it's not on topic, but what a hit. I went full. I even tweeted. I don't know if people know Alan Partridge, but the fake the fake soccer broadcaster that is the creation of Steve Coogan, the actor.
Yeah.
Where a guy scores a banger and he just yells, "Shit! Did you see that?" Which is my favorite goal call of all time. Because it's on TV. That's a joke. A commentator yelling, "Did you see that?" is hilarious. Anyways, you mentioned Edison Ascona, and he does have like a very solid game, all things considered, for Vegas. Gets the assist, like you mentioned, but him receiving the ball, breaking lines, both dribbling and passing, he is playing sort of in this. It's not quite a 10, but sort of like a more advanced 8, I guess, like in this midfield. And he does look like trouble. Like he looks like he's leveled up for sure. Since he was on loan briefly with Locomotive, where he just seemed like he struggled to kind of get involved in games, and whatever's gone down in training at Inter Miami, it feels like he's at least shed that. You mentioned Ricky Alba. He comes on, and he was, I don't know if it's a fitness thing or if it was he joined the team later and all that sort of stuff. Obviously Vegas were putting this team together in the last literally like 45 days. So, it's been kind of whirlwind. But Alba comes on late in this game, and his first minutes of the season, he plays half an hour, and they logged basically it was sort of similar to Locomotive in that Tulsa dropped back with a 3-0. As soon as they got the 3-0 lead, they sort of dropped back, but Vegas absolutely peppered them in the late stages of this game. The last half hour or so, it was all lights. They end up with 22 shots or something like that. Just an absolute barrage of Tulsa. And they create a handful of big chances, and Alba does score from the Ascona assist. So him coming into the team, definitely a big change in terms of goal scoring pedigree. He's primarily been in Norway's second division, I think. But he does have some decent years, like, you know, a goal involvement every other game sort of player. So, you know, definitely some quality in that team. And then a player that stood out to me watching it back was JC Ngando in midfield, who they signed from Vancouver Whitecaps. He was playing in Amiens Academy in France, and then had just transferred to Paris FC and was playing in their reserves when COVID hit and football in France completely shut down, to the point where like they were asking about like the viability of some clubs. I think like Alexis Bissetti was quite vocal when he went back to France about like sort of how damaging it was to the lower leagues in France when they shut down in the manner that they did. So Ngando like leaves and is like, I'm going to go to college in the States and like go play football. So he goes to UNC Greensboro and ends up getting drafted in MLS like after he came here basically as like a way to continue playing through COVID. So anyways, he was absolutely like electric out there. And as a 6, I think there's certain aspects of this Vegas team that are actually a matchup problem for us, because our midfield has really struggled to assert themselves like over these early games. And the 2 best players on lights against Tulsa were Azcona and Ngando, both in midfield. One as a destroyer sort of, or like a deep playmaker in Ngando, and then Azcona as a more mobile sort of 8. I don't love that coming into the game, like just based on how our midfield has been playing.
Well, and on top of that, they have Coleman Gannon in there too, who was like quietly just the water carrier, 94% accurate passing. And I think Ngando also went above 90%. So, I mean, when they get the ball down, they are keeping it very well and moving the ball around very accurately. So, yeah, I mean, it'll be the onus will be on us not to let them settle into a rhythm, because they can hurt teams. And, you know, they did score pull 1 back against Tulsa. So they don't, you know, they look like they don't know when they're beaten, you know, much unlike how they were last season. But just fun fact, do you know who else is at Amiens that you might not have clocked?
Who?
Andy Carroll.
Andy Carroll?
Andy Carroll. He's playing at Amiens.
You're just a good Darwin Nunez? Andy Carroll?
I just thought that was funny because it's extremely random.
That is so strange.
Yeah. But anyway. Storied club in France, so. I
will say, and Christian, I'm not sure if you were able to see Vegas, but they made some upgrades to Cashman Field, and they moved the camera to the stadium side. I think they actually made that change last year, maybe, but they've done away with the scissor lift that was being blown around by the wind the entire game, and felt like I was watching some kind of like, I don't know, like fucking Black Hawk Down or something like in Vegas. It was they've moved that. They've added a bunch of like, it almost looks like club level seating. I don't know, Mika, if you like on the far sideline, like rather than it just being open all the way back to the outfield fence, like they've added some kind of like seating. It's not bleachers. It's like actual box seats. It looks like, and maybe some club level, but Cashman Field is looking like a more serious like operation as well. Like not something, you know, it's not the meme that it has been.
So is there a landing pad for the helicopter now? For the cash drop helicopter?
I don't know. I think Joey Bats is, I don't know if he'll do the wild the wild promotions. He was given off. I mean, Christian, you mentioned it in game 1 in Memphis, but he was in Memphis like watching the game, and it felt very like like European owner, like attending the game and like very invested in what was happening.
Yeah, we'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah, we'll see how serious they get. But, well, guys, I mean, I know it's an enviable task, and Mikka, we've been off to a very rough start in terms of predictions. But what do you guys think will happen in Vegas on Saturday?
What will happen in Vegas will stay in Vegas. Jeez. Yeah, the predictions are shocking for me. I think I'm gonna go with a 1-1 draw. Yeah, I'm just feeling that. I think we've been very not lucky, but I mean Jamal Await has just kept out some absolutely crazy chances, and without him, like I don't see us keeping a clean sheet. I could be wrong, but I don't know. But I do see us scoring though, so.
I think I need to fact check myself here real quick. I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to try and be optimistic this year is my resolution. So I think that we're going to get on track at the exact same point that we did last year. Away match as the fourth match of the season, our first away match. And I think that this is the one. I'm going to go for a 3-0 win.
Man.
I have no reason to think that other than history repeating itself.
Yeah. No, it's interesting too because stylistically, I guess, like Tulsa played like without the ball essentially, and just like let Vegas have it like 29% or something. So we could hit them on the counter. It's clearly something that we've been setting up for. I don't know until I see a multi-goal game, I'm not ready to predict a multi-goal game. Like 1-1 feels like safe. So maybe I'll go for a 1-0. Just hope that we do unto others as they have done unto us. And inflict a narrow victory. I think the one thing that we are like that we have like sort of under punch is the fact that like at least against Hartford we did create like quite a bit. So we've definitely got the capability. I'm just like I'm also very worried about just the size of our team and who's going to play in this friendly cuz like I don't know. If I see anybody who's going to play on Saturday like anywhere near that field, I'm going to lose it.
Hey man, I don't think I could blame you.
Because all it takes is like if it's a Brandan Craig situation, someone just like rolls over their ankle, like in the Mountain Star Derby, like I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Well, let's not manifest that, shall we?
No, no, we should be okay. So. Cautious optimism, I guess, is what we'll say about Saturday night in Vegas. Obviously, Wednesday, the friendly against Bravos, it will be an interesting watch. We'll see how it all plays out and who actually participates, and then straight back with an away match at Vegas. We haven't talked about our watch-alongs for away matches, but we'll have to get those going at some point. But all that being said, like I said at the top of the episode, hope everyone is enjoying so far. And please subscribe and rate and review and all those things on your favorite podcast platform for us. And follow along on Twitter or Instagram at Seriously Loco. and check out our new digs on YouTube as well. We'll be back after the Vegas match, likely to recap things and look ahead to the next one. But until then, stay loco.